Good evening and welcome to Avenue Zero. The open road may seem empty, but some nights, danger rides alongside. In this episode, we're sharing 3 terrifying true stories from truckers who encountered nightmares no one should ever face. Subscribe for weekly horror tales that will keep you looking over your shoulder. The first disappearance happened on a storm-soaked Tuesday in late October of 1997. Rain had been falling in long, silver curtains across the desert highway, the kind that turns asphalt into a mirror and makes headlights blur into ghostly streaks. That evening, a 39-year-old truck driver named Richard Calloway was making his usual run from Phoenix, Arizona to Denver, Colorado. Richard was known among fellow drivers for his spotless record and his trademark rig, a massive emerald green Freightliner with polished chrome that gleamed even in the dimmest light. At 11:41 p.m., the truck was captured on grainy security footage pulling into a lonely wayside stop called Raven's Rest, a desolate station along Highway 46 in northern New Mexico. The camera showed the truck rumble into the lot, parked neatly in a corner, and then nothing. By dawn, the Freightliner was still there. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, the engine long cold, as though it had been abandoned in the middle of routine. But Richard Calloway himself was gone. Inside the cab, investigators later found his leather logbook, written in his careful handwriting, its last entry timed only minutes before he should have gone to bed. His travel bag remained zipped and untouched. A half-empty cup of black coffee sat in the cup holder, steamless, its ring of condensation marking how long it had been forgotten. His wallet lay open on the passenger seat, with nearly $200 untouched inside. No blood, no broken glass, no struggle, just silence and absence. It was as if Calloway had stepped into the night and melted into the desert air. This would have been baffling enough on its own, but what made the case eerie was Calloway's reputation. In 15 years of long-haul driving, he had never once missed a delivery. His dispatcher later told reporters that Richard was as reliable as the ticking of a clock, a man who would call if he expected to be even 10 minutes behind schedule. Yet that night, his scheduled check-in call never came. Authorities launched a massive search around Raven's Rest. Deputies, volunteers, and dogs scoured the jagged mesas and sagebrush plains under a gray October sky. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of fabric. No tire tracks suggesting he had left with someone else. It was as though the desert had swallowed him whole. For a time, the mystery stood alone, a tragic but isolated vanishing. That changed 6 weeks later. On December 11th of the same year, a second trucker pulled into Raven's Rest, almost to the hour when Calloway had last been seen. Her name was Eleanor Price, a 43-year-old driver with more than 2 decades on the road. Unlike Richard, Eleanor was famously cautious. Friends described her as meticulous about safety, the sort who double-checked every lock before sleeping in her cab. She even had a nightly ritual, calling her sister to give her precise coordinates and the exact time she planned to leave in the morning. At 12:12 a.m., Eleanor made that call. She told her sister she planned to grab 4 hours of rest before heading north. She also mentioned something peculiar, that there was only one other vehicle in the lot, a dark sedan parked far away under the flickering glow of a faulty lamp. She noticed its interior light glowing faintly. By 6:30 a.m., when Eleanor failed to call as promised, her sister grew alarmed and phoned the trucking company. Within the hour, a state patrol unit rolled up to Raven's Rest. There stood Eleanor's indigo blue Peterbilt, parked exactly as she had described. Her logbook showed one last entry at 12:18 a.m. Her purse was locked in the same compartment where she always stowed it. On the bunk, the blankets were slightly disturbed, but not in the way that suggested a full night's rest. It looked as though she had only sat there briefly, not slept. And then came the chilling discovery. The rest stop's camera, positioned high above the lot, had captured something at 2:21 a.m. A lone figure approached Eleanor's truck. The footage, grainy and distorted, showed a person of average build dressed in dark clothing with some kind of cap pulled low over his head. He walked straight to her cab without hesitation and knocked firmly on the door. For a moment, nothing. Then, the door cracked open. A conversation seemed to follow. Muted gestures, indistinct movement. Then, inexplicably, Eleanor climbed down from her truck and walked alongside the stranger, both vanishing beyond the edge of the camera's eye. Neither returned. By morning, the mysterious sedan Eleanor had noticed was gone. Its license plate, never captured by the outdated cameras, was lost to the night. 2 truckers gone, both from the same forgotten outpost, within weeks of each other. The coincidences were impossible to ignore. Soon, local law enforcement was joined by federal agents, and the Raven's Rest disappearances became a national story whispered across CB radios. Truckers refused to stop anywhere near the stretch of Highway 46. To them, Raven's Rest had become cursed ground. And then, in the spring of 1998, the desert coughed up something tangible. 30 miles southwest of Raven's Rest, road workers clearing debris after a flash flood found a weathered wallet lodged between stones in a dry gully. Inside was the driver's license of Richard Calloway. The find reignited the search, and within weeks, more disturbing clues were uncovered. A single woman's work boot, confirmed as Eleanor Price's, wedged in the sand. And most unsettling of all, a battered notebook, its pages smudged but legible, listing the names of long-haul drivers. Richard Calloway's name was there, Eleanor's too. 3 more names had been written, and then crossed out. Investigators scrambled to track the other names. 2, Martin Haskins and Luis Romero, matched truckers who had vanished in 1996 and 1997 from remote stops in Arizona and Texas. Their cases had never been connected, separated by hundreds of miles. Now, they formed a grim constellation. The third name chilled detectives even more. Harold Dunbar, age 55, a driver very much alive. When contacted, Harold reluctantly admitted to something he had never told a soul. In July of 1996, while parked overnight at Raven's Rest, a man had approached his truck claiming car trouble. But something in the stranger's manner, polite yet oddly rehearsed, his speech strangely formal, made Harold refuse to open his door. The man had grown agitated, eventually muttering that he would add him to the list. Then headlights of another truck broke the tension, and the stranger slipped away into darkness. Harold's description matched the figure from the camera. Medium build, dark clothing, cap. But he added a detail the footage could never show. The man spoke with an educated accent, choosing words too refined for the lonely highway. With each revelation, the case grew darker. Police set up undercover operations at Raven's Rest and along Highway 46. For months, nothing. It was as though the predator had melted back into the shadows, waiting. Then, in January of 1999, a hiker exploring an abandoned mine shaft in the foothills, 15 miles from Raven's Rest, made a grim discovery. Inside, wedged behind collapsed timbers, were human remains. Forensic tests confirmed them as Richard Calloway. The condition of the body told a story that investigators dared only whisper. Richard had not died quickly. He had been kept alive for weeks, slowly wasting away. The discovery led authorities to search other nearby mines, relics of the old silver rush. What they found was like stepping into a nightmare. In one shaft, crude cages fashioned from rusting iron bars. In another, Eleanor's personal items. In another, Luis Romero's trucker cap. And then, the worst of it. Deep underground, investigators found a chamber that had been converted into a grotesque trophy room. Logbooks, keys, trinkets, and on the walls, photographs. dozens of them taken from a distance, surveillance style. Truckers caught unaware at gas stations, rest stops, diners. Some were the victims already known. Others were faces never identified. Among the photos lay journals, filled with clinical notes written in precise, detached language. The author did not use names. Victims were referred to as subjects. Each entry documented how they responded to isolation, how their hope faded over time. The tone was not one of cruelty, but of study, as if someone had been conducting experiments in human despair. But the journals gave nothing of identity. No name, no confession, just cold observation. For nearly 2 years, the trail went cold again, and then fate intervened. In the summer of 2001, during a routine traffic stop in the town of Silver Crest, Utah, officers arrested a 46-year-old man named Leonard Voss. He had been pulled over for a broken taillight, but inside his vehicle, police found multiple forged IDs, a police scanner, and maps marked with rest stops across the Southwest. A search of his modest rental home uncovered the final truth. Hidden behind a false wall was a collection of items stolen from victims, photographs identical to those found in the mines, and journals continuing the same chilling observations. Voss was no drifter. He was a former professor of psychology who had lost his university post years earlier after proposing ethically questionable experiments involving human isolation. After his dismissal, he had taken his work to the roads. When confronted, he showed no regret. He told investigators they were ideal subjects, alone, hardened, built for endurance. I only wanted to see how long hope could last when stripped of everything. His method was simple. He approached drivers under the guise of needing help. A stranded motorist, a fellow trucker, a false emergency. Once close, he used a hidden stun device to incapacitate them, then transported them to the abandoned mines where he could continue his experiments undisturbed. In 2003, Leonard Voss was convicted of multiple counts of kidnapping and murder. He received life sentences with no chance of release. Authorities believe the known victims represent only a fraction of his crimes. Many truckers vanish quietly, their absence is explained away by the solitary, transient nature of their work. Today, at Raven's Rest, there stands a small memorial, a weathered stone engraved with the names of Calloway, Price, Haskins, Romero, and others unknown. Drivers who pass along Highway 46 rarely stop there, especially after dusk. They whisper a nickname for it, the Hollow Mile. For truckers, it is more than a memorial. It is a warning, a reminder of how vulnerability hides in the wide open spaces where headlights stretch into eternity and the night swallows sound. A reminder that sometimes the greatest danger does not come from the road itself, but from the stranger who steps out of the shadows, asking for help. And it is a reminder, too, of how easily trust can be twisted, how compassion, the instinct to aid another traveler, became the very snare that fed a predator's obsession. Even now, drivers say, when the night is too still and the highway too empty, they feel it. The weight of unseen eyes, the sense that the desert has not forgotten. The desert can play cruel tricks on the human mind. Endless miles of empty road, stars too sharp against the black sky, and a silence so deep that even the sound of your own breath feels unnatural. Drivers call it peaceful, others call it unnerving. But on certain nights, the line between those two can vanish, just like the men who've disappeared out here, swallowed whole by the desert's darkness. One of those men was named Daniel Mercer. It was the early hours of September 19, 1995, when Mercer vanished into the Nevada wastelands. A 43-year-old long-haul trucker with nearly 2 decades of experience, he was known for preferring solitary night runs. While most truckers swapped stories over coffee at truck stops, Daniel enjoyed the quiet company of the highway. Moonlight glinting on the hood of his rig, the hum of tires on asphalt, the sense that out here the whole world had thinned down to just him and the road. He once told his wife that the desert was like an empty church, silent, endless, and sacred. That night, he was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce on his usual run from Reno, Nevada to Sacramento, California. At 1:22 a.m., he radioed into his dispatcher from a lonely rest stop just outside the faded town of Gray Spring, Nevada. He reported no problems. The weather was clear, with a pale moon hanging low and a wind so light it barely stirred the sand. His truck, a sky blue Kenworth with polished chrome, was purring like always. He expected to arrive in Sacramento before dawn, right on schedule. At about 2:30 a.m., another driver, Harold Hal Tucker, heading eastbound, spotted Mercer's truck coming the opposite way near the Granite Ridge stretch of highway. They knew each other well enough to exchange a quick flash of headlights in greeting, that silent camaraderie between truckers. Tucker would later tell investigators that Mercer looked fine. Steady speed, nothing unusual. That moment, fleeting as it was, would be the last time anyone saw Daniel Mercer alive. The next confirmed sighting came from a lonely traffic camera about 40 miles further west. At 3:08 a.m., the footage showed Mercer's truck cruising steadily, lights bright against the dark expanse. He was on schedule, nothing amiss. Then, silence. The blue Kenworth was never seen again. At 3:46 a.m., truckers monitoring CB Channel 19 began picking up frantic transmissions. The voice was Daniel's, shaken, urgent, not the steady professional tone his colleagues knew. "They've been behind me for 20 minutes, he said. "Those lights, they're right on my bumper. Can't see a thing. Whoever you are, back off." Several drivers responded, telling him to keep calm and pull into the next rest stop, about 12 miles ahead. Daniel agreed. His voice was tense, but he promised he'd get off the road and shake them. 3 minutes later, another transmission crackled through. His voice was sharper now, ragged with fear. "They're trying to run me off. They're coming up alongside me." The words cut off mid-sentence. Two drivers running about half an hour behind him said they saw, in the distance, a strange set of headlights swerving violently, followed by a flash, like light reflecting off glass, or maybe something more unnatural. By the time they reached the spot, there was nothing there. No skid marks, no overturned rig, no Daniel Mercer. When he failed to arrive in Sacramento, his company raised the alarm. Nevada Highway Patrol launched a full-scale search. They combed the highway for miles in both directions. Helicopters sweeping desert flats with infrared cameras, ground teams scouring washes and ravines. But the desert gave nothing back. Not a scrap of metal, not a drop of oil. A 70,000-pound tractor trailer had simply ceased to exist. 2 days later, a discovery deepened the mystery. Tire tracks, Mercer's, were found leaving the highway, veering onto a maintenance road barely used by anyone. Investigators followed them for nearly 7 miles into the desert before they simply ended. The tracks stopped dead in a flat stretch of sand, as though the truck had lifted off the ground and vanished into the air. No debris, no spilled cargo, not even a footprint. Detectives tried to piece together theories: hijacking, cargo theft, insurance scam, but none fit. Daniel Mercer had no debts, no history of crime, no reason to fake his disappearance. He loved his work. He loved his family. Just weeks before, he'd become a grandfather for the first time. He'd been proud, almost glowing, telling friends he was planning shorter runs so he could spend more time at home. Why would a man like that simply vanish? 3 weeks later, a hiker stumbled across Mercer's wallet 30 miles north of where the tracks had ended. Inside were his license, credit cards, and $241 in cash. Nothing was missing. Robbery was off the table. Then came another piece. In late November, road crews found a smashed CB radio half buried in a dry creek bed 15 miles from the highway. Serial numbers confirmed it belonged to Mercer. Forensics revealed multiple fingerprints, but not one matched any known database. By then, whispers were spreading through the trucking community. Stories of drivers being followed at night by vehicles with blinding headlights, so bright they drowned out the road, forcing men to pull over. Some claimed to have seen a pale, windowless van parked at desert rest areas, lights off, engine idling, always at night, always watching. One driver said a white van forced him onto the shoulder, then sped away the moment another car approached. Another swore he saw the same van shadowing him for miles, only to vanish without a trace. In January 1996, police in Reno thought they'd cracked it. They arrested 3 men tied to a cargo theft ring that had been targeting trucks across the West. During questioning, one suspect made an offhand remark about a job gone wrong on Route 50. Investigators pressed him, but before he said more, he demanded a lawyer. Within 24 hours, he was dead in his cell. Officially, a suicide by hanging. Off the record, officers admitted the timing was too neat. Whatever he knew, he took it to the grave. The case froze, then gathered dust. Mercer's name became a training scenario for rookie troopers, a cautionary tale for truckers swapping stories over coffee. Documentaries ran segments, always ending with the same conclusion. No one knew what had happened. A decade later, in 2007, another fragment surfaced. A hiker exploring an abandoned mining site north of Gray Springs stumbled across a rusted VIN plate. Numbers matched Mercer's Kenworth. The site was so remote, it was only reachable by rugged dirt tracks. But no trace of the truck itself was ever found. No frame, no engine, no cargo. Just the plate, as if deliberately left behind. And then, in 2013, the story turned darker. A retired waitress from a diner in eastern Nevada came forward, saying she had kept something for nearly 20 years out of fear. In the weeks after Mercer vanished, a stranger had left behind a photograph on her counter. She described him as quiet, pale, and polite, with eyes that seemed to watch too much. The photo was a Polaroid, blurry, grainy, but it showed a blue truck, uncannily like Mercer's, inside a vast, shadowy structure that looked like a hangar or warehouse. The license plate area had been carefully obscured, as though someone wanted to taunt, not reveal. Forensic experts studied it. They couldn't confirm it was Mercer's Kenworth. But the resemblance was undeniable. His family clung to hope. His wife, Linda Mercer, spent years pressing lawmakers for trucker safety reforms. She lobbied for mandatory GPS trackers, panic buttons, anything that might prevent another disappearance. She died in 2018, never learning what became of her husband. Their children still carry the weight of unanswered questions. Every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, truckers gather on Route 50, the loneliest road in America, to drive in silent convoy past the spot where he was last heard. Engines hum low. No CB chatter, just headlights in the dark, moving together through a desert that still keeps its secrets. What unsettles investigators most isn't just Mercer's vanishing. It's the void. A massive truck and its driver erased with surgical precision, leaving only scattered clues. A wallet, a radio, a number plate, a photo. Was it a cargo theft ring gone wrong? Was Daniel in the wrong place, seeing something he wasn't meant to? Or was something far stranger at work that night? Something that had nothing to do with crime or money, but with the endless desert itself, where headlights can blind, where silence stretches forever, where things vanish and are never returned. To this day, truckers talk about the stretch west of Gray Spring in hushed tones. Some refuse to drive it after midnight. Others travel in pairs or informal convoys, headlights doubled against the dark. They call it Mercer's Mile, a place where the highway narrows into something haunted. The case remains unsolved, and the loneliest road in America is lonelier still, carrying the ghost of a man, his truck, and a mystery that has never stopped following those who travel its endless miles. Ethan Calder had been navigating the treacherous curves of Montana's Iron Ridge Pass for nearly 16 years. At 50, the seasoned long-haul driver knew every hairpin bend, every steep gradient, every potential hazard along the narrow mountain route that snaked from the mining towns of the northern slopes to distribution centers in Helena. What he couldn't have anticipated on the morning of July 14, 2019, was that his deep familiarity with this perilous road would be tested like never before, and that his instincts would become the difference between life and death, not just for him, but for countless unsuspecting travelers. The day began unremarkably. Calder departed from the Granite Mining Supply Depot at 5:20 a.m., his 18-wheeler loaded with industrial machinery, bound for the city. The early departure was deliberate, giving him time to traverse the most dangerous sections of Iron Ridge Pass before the influx of tourist traffic arrived later in the morning. The weather was near perfect, clear skies, a soft breeze, and temperatures hovering in the low 60s. Ideal conditions for a route that had claimed far too many overconfident drivers over the years. By 7:40 a.m., Calder had reached the western approach to the pass. As he began the steep series of switchbacks that would carry him up to the 11,900-foot summit, he noticed something odd through his windshield. A dark green pickup truck was parked at a maintenance pullout just ahead, hazard lights blinking. Two men wearing high-visibility vests appeared to be placing traffic cones along a section of the guardrail. At first glance, it seemed routine. Summer maintenance crews were a common sight. Calder slowed slightly, giving them plenty of space as he passed, but a subtle unease settled in his chest. Something about the scene didn't feel right. 10 minutes later, as he rounded a notorious hairpin curve locally known as Widowmaker's Bend, realization hit him. The truck he had passed bore none of the official markings or identification numbers required of Montana Department of Transportation vehicles. The detail was subtle, so subtle that most drivers would never notice. But Calder, accustomed to observing legitimate crews, instantly recognized the discrepancy. Reaching for his CB radio to contact State Patrol dispatch, he was cut short when a warning light on his dashboard blinked and the truck shuddered, losing power mid-curve. The sudden mechanical failure, occurring just minutes after passing the suspicious crew, sent a jolt of alarm through him. Calder carefully guided the struggling vehicle into a scenic overlook pullout, applied the emergency brakes, and lifted the hood. What he discovered sent a shiver down his spine. The main fuel line had been neatly severed and then loosely reattached, a sabotage designed to allow the truck to run normally for a few minutes before catastrophic failure. Had the truck given way a mere 2 minutes later, he would have been navigating a stretch with no shoulder and a sheer 1,400-foot drop. Calder's dash cam, installed years earlier after a near collision with a distracted tourist, had been recording continuously. Reviewing the footage, he could clearly make out the two men from the maintenance crew, their faces partially obscured by caps and sunglasses. Most crucially, the camera had captured the license plate of their pickup. Attempting to call State Patrol on his cell phone yielded nothing, no signal. But the truck's satellite communication system was operational. He sent an emergency alert to his dispatcher, including a brief description of the situation and his exact coordinates. The response came almost immediately. No scheduled MDT maintenance in Iron Ridge Pass that morning. Calder was advised to stay put and not approach anyone who stopped. Just as he acknowledged the message, a sedan slowed as it passed his truck. The driver, a man in his mid-30s wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, studied the disabled rig with unnerving intensity. The car disappeared around the next bend, but Calder's instincts screamed that the encounter wasn't over. Within minutes, the same sedan returned, now approaching from the opposite direction. It pulled into the overlook about 50 feet from his truck. The two men stepped out, recognizable from the dash cam footage, now wearing civilian clothes. One held what appeared to be a tire iron, partially concealed along his leg. Calder locked himself inside the cab, phone poised to record, and watched as they approached, trying to feign casual helpfulness. "Hey there, need some help?" the taller man called out, his tone deceptively friendly. "Looks like you're having engine trouble." Calder didn't respond. Instead, he sounded the truck's air horn, an ear-splitting blast that reverberated across the mountainside. The men flinched. A second blast followed, and they exchanged a glance that made it clear they knew their intended victim was aware of the danger. The confrontation escalated. The taller of the two brandished what looked like a handgun from his waistband. Through the closed windows, Calder heard him shout, "Last chance! Open the door, or we're breaking in." Calder's mind raced. During his military service decades earlier, he had participated in secure transport training, learning how to use high ground advantage and maintain composure under threat. He knew his elevated cab gave him tactical leverage. He also knew authorities were aware of the situation, though help could still be 20 to 30 minutes away on the remote mountain road. A plan formed. He would maintain a standoff, using the air horn periodically to keep the men tense and potentially alert passing motorists. As the armed man advanced, Calder executed a maneuver unique to modern semi-trucks, a precise release of compressed air from the undercarriage, accompanied by a grinding of the brake system. The sudden blast of air disoriented the would-be hijacker, causing him to stumble and drop the weapon. Fate intervened. A Montana State Patrol cruiser, responding to an unrelated call higher up the pass, rounded the bend. Seeing two men confronting a disabled semi-truck, one retrieving a dropped object, the officer immediately activated lights and siren, ordering the men to show their hands. Instead, they fled toward the sedan, but the patrol car blocked their escape until additional units arrived. The subsequent investigation uncovered a chilling pattern. The two men, brothers Aaron and Nathaniel Crowley, were linked to at least 7 other incidents across Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, where commercial trucks had mysteriously failed in remote locations. In 2 cases, the drivers had vanished entirely, leaving their trucks abandoned. A search of the Crowleys' property revealed driver's licenses of missing truckers, cargo manifests, and meticulously detailed maps of mountain highways, pinpointing curves and pullouts ideal for ambush. For Calder, the most harrowing revelation came during the brothers' trial. GPS data confirmed they had been tracking his truck from the depot that morning, specifically targeting him and his cargo. Had they succeeded with the sabotage, the semi would have lost power and braking capability on one of the deadliest stretches of the pass. The potential consequences were catastrophic, not only for Calder, but for any unsuspecting vehicles behind him. A runaway semi down Iron Ridge Pass during peak tourist traffic could have caused multiple collisions, potentially claiming dozens of lives. The case prompted federal scrutiny of cargo theft and trafficking networks in the Mountain West. Investigators discovered the Crowley brothers had been operating undetected for nearly 3 years, targeting trucks transporting high-value industrial equipment easily resold on black market channels. For the trucking industry, the Iron Ridge Pass incident became a turning point. Security protocols were overhauled. Real-time tracking, emergency alert systems, pre-trip mechanical inspections at secure facilities rather than roadside, and escort vehicles for high-value shipments through remote areas. Dash cams, once optional, became standard issue. Ethan Calder received commendations from state law enforcement and the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. His quick thinking and composure were credited not only with saving his own life, but potentially the lives of dozens of motorists who would have been on the pass later that morning. Calder continues to navigate the mountain routes of Montana, now leading training programs for other drivers on security awareness and emergency response. Reflecting on that July morning, he emphasizes vigilance above all else. The mountains will always have their natural dangers. Steep grades, narrow roads, falling rocks. Those you can prepare for. It's the ones that look ordinary, until suddenly they're not, that you have to watch for. Sometimes the most important skill isn't how you handle the truck. It's noticing what doesn't fit in the world around you. For truckers traversing isolated highways, Calder's story is taught as a cautionary tale. The lesson is clear. In remote stretches where cell service disappears and help is hours away, survival may hinge on noticing subtle inconsistencies. The unmarked service vehicle, the overly helpful stranger, the mechanical failure occurring at precisely the wrong moment. At the scenic overlook where Calder's awareness averted disaster, a small, unofficial memorial now sits. Truckers familiar with the story often leave coins or small tokens on a weathered rock as a silent tribute. It stands as a stark reminder that on America's most beautiful and treacherous roads, the difference between a routine drive and a deadly encounter can hinge on a single moment of awareness, a single act of vigilance, and a single decision to trust one's instincts.